right now, and let's talk about the controls on console. So everything I'm about to mention is coming from the perspective of you're going to play on PlayStation or Xbox using a controller, and that on top of that, you want to play with realistic controls. The game comes with an arcade control setup, and it comes with like a mouse aim setup where the plane autopilots. But if you want to get involved with this game and play it like an actual flight sim, and you want to do that with a controller, you're going to need to make some major adjustments to the default controls. So, a lot of things are different than the default controls, but let's just assume that you are failing with the default controls and you want to do something on a controller that works well. And at this point, I feel like, yeah, it works well. I've done a lot of tweaking, and yeah, so let's just go through it. And then we'll fly and we'll actually discuss it. So, you're going to go to controls, you're going to go to realistic controls, and then we're just going to go through these things like one at a time. Auto trim, you're going to turn that on. Turn that on. Oh, actually, let me give all my caveats. The realistic control setup I'm about to explain is it's only going to work with, how do I phrase this? It's only going to work with fighters and bombers. This is not for if you're using jets with missiles. That would require a different controller layout. But this is basically if you're playing realistic controls with a fighter or with a bomber. So that's what's happening. And if you're going to play in the cockpit and you're going to play realistic. So all of these things, if you check all the boxes, then this should be helpful. And I'm going to try to get this done as quickly as possible. So, in controls, we go to realistic controls, and we turn auto trim on. We're going to have all of our guns on R2. Okay. We're going to open bomb bay doors with the left button. It's going to be left with the D-pad. To drop a bomb, we're going to attach it to X plus left button. So you'll be able to drop bomb. Basically, that makes sense. I mean, if you're a bomber pilot, it makes sense. Left button opens it, then you hold X and tap left, and it'll be one individual bomb. You could do this for all your bombs, but I find it's easy just to tap, this multiple times, and I don't know. It's not a big deal to drop the bombs manually one at a time. This is where it's going to start getting incredibly complicated. Okay, so main controls. The default controls put it on the right thumbstick, but we need to get it off the right thumbstick. So how we're going to do that is we're going to go into Edit Axis, and we're going to go to increase value L2, and then decrease value X plus L2. And then this is where I have all these settings. You don't have to keep it this way, but you're always going to need to turn on relative control. You're going to need, once you get off using thumbsticks, you're basically going to need relative control whenever it's a non-thumbstick action. So turn relative control on, put it all at this stuff, and then at that point, if you don't like how it feels, this gauge right here will dictate how long you have to hold the triggers down or the command down for it to go from full to 0. So right now, if you look, this is what I have it set to. So this is for throttle axis, and then we're going to see what that looks like. So let me go to Save Changes. When you're changing your default controls, you're basically going to hit replace a lot. You're going to replace a lot of shit. You're not going to hit add, because if you hit add, you're going to really screw your controls up. After you make this control setting, make sure to save it, which you have the option by hitting R1 to save, because when you go into full real controls, it will then default you out of this control scheme, and you'll have to rebuild this from scratch, which I have to do the hard way. It takes like 10 to 15 minutes to rebuild it from scratch, so even if you know exactly what you're doing, it takes like 10 to 15 minutes. So easily a lengthy process. Let's look at the throttle. I'm going to hit continue anyway. So, if I hold down L2, you're going to look at the IAS in the top left corner, and then you're going to look at the air mile per hour. This gauge right here, right? So that's the gauge you're going to be looking at. So let me hit L2, and I'm holding it down. Okay, that's how long it took to get to 100%. So let's throttle off now. And that's how long it takes to go to 0%, right? With the commands as I've laid them out. So now let's go back into controls, and let's play with that for just a second, just to prove this point. So we're going to go to throttle axis, go to edit axis. So now I'm going to jack this down to 0. Okay? Whoop, wrong button. Look at, even I'm a little rusty. So hang on, let's hit R2, because that's really natural. Now let's hit X. Cool, let's back out, and we'll hit continue. So now let's hold down L2. So I'm literally holding down L2, and you can see the throttle climbing at like a snail's pace. So you can see the throttle climbing at a snail's pace, basically. Let's try it again. So that's me holding it down. And so, obviously, 0 is not good, because then it's going to take forever to throttle up and throttle down. So obviously, that does not work. So let me go back to the menu real quick. Hang on. I'm giving the baby something to eat. Here you go, baby. All right, so let's... Oh my god, that's ridiculous. I can't even deal with that. So let's go back to controls. And let's go back to throttle axis and hit edit. So I'm going to keep this to 70, but anywhere between 50 and 100 is probably acceptable. I like to keep it at 70. Let's see what that looks like now. So let's back out, hit continue anyway. All right, so let's hit it. Yeah, see? Much faster. So I find that that's way better. Like, I can actually, it's not crawling at a snail's pace, you know, it's pretty good. I could make it faster, but I like it where it's at. I think it's fine. I don't think there's any problems with that. So now let's take off, and we'll discuss some other things with how I have this set up. So right now all I've really changed is the throttle, and the pitch is going to be the same thing on the left thumbstick. So I keep that the same. So the up and down on the left thumbstick I keep the same. Not a big deal. But let's go back into controls. So we just did throttle axis, right? We did the bomb bay doors because we're going to need that. We left this default. That's fine, right? Now we're going to go into roll axis. Roll axis is defaulted on, I want to say, the right stick. It's something crazy. It's defaulted to the right stick. What we're going to do is we're going to go to edit axis, and we're going to go to choose joystick axis, and we're going to put it on the left stick, okay? And that's it. Not a big deal. When you put it on the left stick, you're going to get this crazy warning about like, oh my god, what am I going to do? You know, like, because it's already previously being used. You're going to hit replace. When you're building this, you're pretty much going to replace everything. And then when you're doing finer details, you're going to hit add. So yeah, anyway, left stick, that's all I do. I don't really care about the dead zone. I mean, I always want a little bit of dead zone, because if you have it all the way off, it's going to create problems with an older controller. So if you have an older controller that doesn't reset perfectly to 0 when you let go of the thumbsticks, which in a lot of cases they don't do it, but you don't really notice it. Most games have a dead zone basically coded in, and you can't control the option. So long story short, put some dead zone in. It wouldn't even hurt to raise that number, but you want it to be something, not 0. Okay, let's hit save changes. So look at the axis has already been assigned. To decal movements, Jesus. I'm gonna hit add because whatever this is, I'm not worried about it. Sometimes you'll hit add, sometimes you'll hit replace, but just pay attention to what it says, and it should make sense. So for that, I'm gonna hit add. It'll be case by case basis for everyone, depending on how far along they are adjusting stuff. So that was roll axis, and once again, if you decide that your roll, you get on the left stick, right? If you decide your roll is too much, you're going to jack down this multiplier, and then your plane will roll slower. And if you jack it up all the way, it will roll to the max. But I like to keep it at like 1.39. It's kind of a random figure. I mean, this you can play with. The multiplier, that'll be up to your personal taste. And then depending on the airplane, it'll change from airplane to airplane, this exact same setting. So for real, I don't know. You're going to have to figure that multiplier value out yourself. But otherwise, this is what it looks like. Okay, save changes. I'll hit add. If I hit replace, what it's going to do is it's going to get rid of moving the decals. So, I mean, I can actually hit replace and that would be fine too, but because I don't care, I'm just going to hit add. It's okay for them to do the same thing twice. Okay, so now yaw axis. This is so complicated. Normally the yaw is on the left thumbstick, which is crazy because I'll explain why this is crazy actually. Let's go back into the airplane real quick. Okay, so check this out. Normally, the left thumbstick, which controls the up and down of this, if you hit left and right with the left thumbstick on default controls, it does this with your feet. It doesn't control the stick. It does the yaw, which to me is crazy. It should be the left thumbstick that also controls the roll, because that's what it does in real life. But they default the game so that instead of it doing this, it does that, which is just crazy. So anyway, hopefully that makes sense. So let's go back into controls, and now we are going to go down to... that's why I put, so basically when you move the roll axis to your left stick, immediately your yaw is not going to work and you're going to need to sort it out. So that's why it's like delete your yaw, put the roll axis on your left stick. I will boot these comments up in a second, but I'm just going to keep going. Actually, my phone's about to die. I can't explain this right now. Okay. So now, yaw axis. You're going to delete whatever's here and you're going to go to edit axis. You're going to increase value to R1. You're going to decrease value to L1, and then you're going to hit reset axis to X. If you can't highlight reset axis, it's because you need to turn on relative control. So, hang on. Let's give the baby some more food, because he's a part of this video too now. If he ever watches this down the road, he's going to be like, who was that in the background? I'm like, that was you. Okay, so take this. Perfect. You're good. All right, perfect. You're the best baby in the world. All right, so maximum value, R1. Minimum value, L1. Reset axis value, X. Make sure to turn on relative control. Now, for relative control... I have the sensitivity to 80. I've played around with it a lot, and I have it to this. You can adjust this, of course, to lower or higher, but just keep it all on what I got. You don't need to have a dead zone because they're digital buttons, but this is what it looks like if you want to get your yaw on the shoulder buttons, which is how Ace Combat works. So if you want Ace Combat controls in this game, you have to do this. And personally, it's a good way to go. The reason why it's so important is because we have to get our right thumbstick to be free aim. And normally the right thumbstick is your throttle and it's your roll axis, which makes no sense. So it's like, okay, get your roll axis and your pitch on the same stick, which should be the left stick. Then all of a sudden your joystick in the plane moves for real, like it would in a real life, and it looks one for one. Get your yaw axis on L1 and R1. And then X button has to reset. The reason why you have to have the reset, if this was on a thumbstick, you don't need to have the X reset, which I'll show that right now. See this reset value? If you're on a thumbstick, you don't need that. But because you're doing buttons, you have to have it. I'll explain why. Well, actually, I'll just show it. So let's go back to the airplane. Okay, cool. So if we... Alright. Oh, let's track my gear. So I'm looking down at my feet. So if I hit R1, I'm going to hold R1 down for 1 second, okay? Now I'm letting go of R1, but my foot doesn't reset the axis. In order to reset the axis, I have to hit X. And then if I hit X, it resets it. So then all of a sudden, it's back to normal. So let's do it again. And if I hit X, see? So hopefully that makes more sense. So X is what goes back to neutral. If I don't key in X, then I have to use L1 and I have to use R1 to basically like get this thing to be perfect, and you'll never get it perfect, especially while you're flying. So hit X, and then it resets the value to square, and you're good to go. That being said, I almost never use the yaw anymore. Now that I've been playing this game for a while, I almost never use it, because I can dogfight without using it. Okay, let's go back to controls. So hopefully that makes sense. But that's how the yaw is set up. Roll sensitivity, I have to 57%. Pitch, I have to 7. Yaw, I have to 97. Your mileage may vary for this. For this, play with it so that it feels right. And it'll be different for everyone. So now, I find that the plane was like, I don't know, like you just play with it. If you have a hard time like aiming with your plane, it's going to be here that's going to fix your aiming when you're flying the plane, like up, down, left, right, and all that stuff. It'll just make your life dramatically easier. So I highly recommend it. Invert aircraft, yeah, I have that. Some people don't like that, but that's how airplanes control. When I play a first-person shooter, I'm not inverted, but when I fly in any vehicle in a game, even if it's that same first-person shooter, I will always have the aircraft inverted, so my brain does both. All right. Mechanization, toggle flaps. You're going to put that on the right button. Not a big deal. Makes sense. Toggle gear. Put that on the up button. These are all the directional pad buttons on the D-pad of the PlayStation. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. Most of the airplanes that aren't jets don't have air brake. So like all of my Spitfires, including my rank 4 and 5 Spitfires, they don't have air brake, so I don't even assign it. If you ever need to assign it, I don't know, put it on like... You'll figure it out. It's not going to be a big deal. You'll have plenty of extra... things you could put it on as an example. Gunners, gunner aiming, right stick, left stick. I don't know if I changed this, but I might have to. I might have. I don't know if I changed this, but I know I jacked the sensitivity down. And yeah, notice that my aiming for the gunner is not inverted. So my brain frequently jumps in between inverted and not inverted depending on what my role is in the game. Not a big deal. It can be done. Toggle view, triangle button, that's default. I play the entire game from inside the cockpit, so it doesn't really matter. I could actually probably get rid of that, because I literally play the entire game in the cockpit, so I could, there you go, triangle button could be used for a bunch of things. Okay, let's go into, this is super important. So, if you want to turn your right thumbstick into a camera, even if you don't play in the cockpit, say you just want your right thumbstick to be looking around, perfectly, this is defaulted to down on the D-pad, and right thumbstick. The problem with that is that if you hold down on the D-pad, you have to take your hand off of the left thumbstick, and so then all of a sudden you can't really fly your plane and look around with the default controls. If you want to do that, you have to change this. So view in battle, whatever it is, reset it. If it doesn't let you reset it, you're going to go to edit axis. At that point, you're going to make it right stick, left and right. And then this is super important, what I'm about to explain. So you make right stick, right, left and right. You're going to turn on relative control. Now, this is something I didn't figure out until today, but just it makes it so much better for this thing. I've been free aiming with the right thumbstick this whole game for like 10 hours or so, but turning on relative control, I'm like, oh my god, it's so much better, and you will see why. Actually, how about this? I'll turn it off. Let's turn off relative control for everything, okay? So hypothetically, I'll just show it. So we're gonna hit add. That's fine. So that was okay. Let's do this one next. Where is it? Okay, so I already did that. So that's left and right. Let's do up and down. Okay, so watch this. So let's turn this all off, and then this will vary. Hang on, let's hit cancel. Oh my god, dude, these controls. Look how difficult this is. Okay, hang on. R2. Okay, save changes. Add. All right, perfect. Let's back out. So, if you just do right stick, left stick, this is how it works. Okay? Does that make sense? This is how it works. I'm just moving at full speed. If I try to like hold it like and keep it in place, it's really easy for the camera to get like this kind of shaky like look to it because like you're just basically moving. You see, it's just kind of a mess. Especially when you're looking at gauges, you're like it's hard, right? So to fix this, I'll show you. Let's go into controls. It's all on the right thumbstick. I don't have to hit the left D-pad. But let's go over to here, and then this is about to make it freaking perfect. We got to do it for both axes though. So let's go to edit, and then we're going to hit relative control, and we're going to turn it on. Okay? Perfect. Okay, yeah, that looks good. Now we'll hit save change. Yeah, I'll hit add. Fine. Okay, let's go to the other one. Okay, let's hit edit. Let's turn it on. This is what I set it to. Hope that makes sense. Okay, let's hit save. Okay, let's hit add. Now I'm going to back out. So now, when I hit the right thumbstick, besides the fact that it's smoother, right, it's not so herky-jerky, if I let go of the thumbstick, I keep looking in that direction. I don't have, like, I'm letting go of the thumbstick. So this is so much more helpful when you're, as an example, I'm going to fly through these clouds, right? So say I'm flying through the clouds, and I need to pay attention to, like, a lot of more of my instrumentation panels, right? Because I can't see anymore, right? It's just like, especially when I get in the thick of it. Let's get it up in here. And this will prove why this is important. So normally you'd be looking like this, and you'd have to be like holding this down, right? And like holding it at a weird angle to see these gauges. But now I don't have to. I can just aim and let go. I can even zoom in, and I get a nice, perfect, steady view of my gauges. So now, without even looking at the cockpit, I know what's going on. So just looking at these like 3 top gauges, I know that my wings are level, because if they weren't level, it would look like that, right? So look at, I'm level. I know that because my airplane's above the horizon line, I'm climbing. The climb thing's to my right, I know how fast I'm climbing. I can see my airspeed. So basically I know what's going on from glancing at this. And when I want to climb, I basically want to like stare at these gauges, like just perfectly. And I don't even need to look at the sky. And this is very important, because if I look up over here, I don't, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, for real, you can get very disoriented. You can easily roll your airplane, and then be looking around, and then being like, trying to pull up, but it's not really pulling up, you're really pulling to the left. Then you look over at your gauge, and you're like, oh god, let's straighten that out. Alright, perfect, straight, alright, good. My airspeed's almost 200 miles an hour, so I can climb. Let's climb. Cool. And then when my airspeed gets down to almost 10, I'm going to lower it back down. I stalled my plane, but it's fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine. So now I know I'm level, and at some point when my engine turns back on, my airspeed will start going back up. Perfect. And this is blind. So if you're flying in the dark, right, or you're flying in the fog, this matters. And being able to let go of the right thumbstick and have my vision stay solid is wonderful. It's so helpful. The only downside is that at some point you'll have to recenter it back on your guns. So if you're terrible at doing that because you're dyslexic and you recenter it that way, kind of a hassle. But otherwise you'll have to recenter your guns. But in general, so much better to have it that way. I wish I had it that way all the time. There's no going back. It's so nice. Like, imagine if I'm doing like a banking turn. I can like literally look up at the enemy while I'm turning, and I don't have to like do this crazy, you know, like perfect ballet with my thumbs, you know? It's just a lot better. And notice that, look it, I can turn this, I can look around. Normally you couldn't do that on the default controls, literally. This would be impossible with the default controls. You could not control the plane and look around at the same time. But now I can. And I can use my yaw. I never do, but I could. You know, it's there. I never do. The yaw just gets you into trouble in like simulation mode. All right, so let's see if, okay, I can't see. This will be a good example of like, hang on. Okay. Let's okay, wait. Okay, wait. All right, hang on. Let's figure out what's going on. So I think, yeah, wait. There we are. Let's look up. I didn't even look at the freaking ground. I looked at my gauges. So yeah, super helpful. I can't recommend how important it is that if you're going to play on console and you want to look around with the right thumbstick, this is the way to do it. And it also works when you're in third person. You could never fly your plane and look around on PlayStation 4 or Xbox without doing it this way. I mean, there might be another way to do it, but the default controls sure as hell don't do it. This is how you're going to do it. So, what else? I think that's almost everything, actually. So yeah, toggle flaps. You won't need flaps up or down, just use toggle flaps. Because toggle flaps basically switches between up or down. You could also do 2 more commands, but you'll save a command by just making it toggle. So just do toggle. The game will always tell you, oh my god, you didn't assign flaps up or flaps down. You don't need it, you have toggle. They're either on or off, they're binary, it's not a big deal. Toggle gear, up button, just makes sense to me. It could be anything you want, that's like spare. Oh, this is super important, actually. So head movement, upward and downward. This you're going to want to assign if you sit in the cockpit. And here's the reason why. This is how you do it, right? So you do increase value, X plus the up button, decrease value, X plus the down button. Enable relative control. This is the sensitivity. I'm going to actually jack it up because I felt like it was a little slow last time, so I'll jack it up to 40. So what this does is, let's go back to continue anyway. Notice that it's telling me, you don't have fire rockets. That's fine, I'm not using any jets. Flaps down, I don't need it because I have the toggle. Toggle air brake, all the planes I own don't have air brakes. If they did, I would assign it to, I don't know, something. It's not a big deal. I'll deal with it when I cross that bridge. So let's go back to here real quick, and let's discuss the last thing. So, head movement. Oh yeah, that's right. Let's show actually what that is. So, when you're in the cockpit, you might feel like this plane is a terrible example. But essentially what you can do is you can sit higher or lower. I'll do it right now. So if I hit X and down on the D-pad, this is what happens. If I hit X plus up on the D-pad, this is what happens. So it allows you to lock your head higher. It basically makes your pilot taller or shorter, right? That's really fundamentally what it does. And depending on the airplane you're sitting in, it's really helpful, all right? This airplane, not a great example, but definitely helpful. Like it's you'll know when you're sitting in a plane and you can't see the nose. Like some planes look like this, and I feel like that's too low. I want to be able to see a little bit of the front fuselage. I find it really helps me get my bearings, just to see a little bit of it, you know. And man, dude, God, I wish I had that thing locked in this whole time. I'm so glad I can just look right and do stuff now. Like that's really helpful. So like as an example, let's pretend that I want to keep my eyes on a guy. I can now. I don't have to like do some crazy ballet of like the thumbsticks. I can just look over and be like, there he is. And then I can like turn and like keep looking, and like it's just helpful. Imagine I'm following an airplane, because I'm actually about to get into a match, but imagine I'm following an airplane. With these controls, if he turns right, I can start turning right and I can follow him and see where he's going as I do my turn. And yeah, it's just one of those things where I'm like, it's very convenient, like super helpful. It's good stuff. What I think I'm going to do now, believe it or not, is I'm going to turn off some stuff that I don't think I need anymore. So, I'm going to turn off some things. I don't need a lot of my heads-up display anymore because I've been using my gauges so much that let's do this. Okay, so, show leading. It doesn't show this anyway. So, indicate airspeed. See, I wonder if I can even turn that off. Maybe it doesn't let me turn it off. Maybe I can just make the UI invisible? Let's see. No, I don't want to try that. That seems crazy. Really, I just want to turn things off, but I feel like if I indicate airspeed, it's going to still give me the speed anyway. Because that's not the option. Speed measurement. Oh yeah, this is where you change it from metric to standard if you want. It's in measurement units and options. So I changed it to miles per hour. Well, to be honest, I really didn't need it because I was using my gauge, and my gauge was miles per hour anyway, so it didn't really matter that it was like giving me kilometers. I never stared at it anyway. Yeah, I don't know if I can actually turn it off. Set flood elements available in flight. Ammo indicator temperature. I guess I can't. That's kind of a bummer. Maybe I can just make the UI invisible. No, I can just make it tiny. I'll have to mess with that. Because I really refuse to believe that it forces me to have that like heads-up display in the top left corner of my screen that I never need to use anymore. I'm going to leave indicate airspeed on. Yeah, it's interesting. There doesn't seem to be like a HUD turn off option. Hmm. Interesting. All right, well, this is the end of me discussing the controls. So at this point, I'm now going to just start playing the game. Hopefully that was helpful, and just keep rewatching the beginning over and over and over again to have this stuff all make sense. But I highly recommend it. If you're playing War Thunder and you want to be able to actually play in realistic mode and have your plane controls make frickin' sense, this way is really killer. Because look at all the stuff I can do. I can shoot, and I can look around, and I can roll, and I can fly and look around. It's not a big deal. This might look like seasick to you, but it's great. Like, look how good that is. Like, that's so much better than the way the game's designed normally. It's like, it's a huge improvement. Just trust me. So yeah, if you're playing on a controller and you want to play realistic controls, it's totally doable. Like, you can totally do it. Not a big deal. My plane's about to fall out of the sky because I'm, like, destroying the engine on purpose. Actually, maybe that's something I should... Oh, no, it's too late. I've just fried this engine. I'm like, it's literally about to die. Because I'm at max speed and I should be going way faster and it's just not happening. Yeah, good enough. Good enough. So, return hangar. And let's hit that. Good. Actually, I think I'll stop the live stream. I'll just start a new one. Alright, I'm going to stop the live stream and I'll start a new one. That way it's completely off this subject matter.